Today on the Melbourne Report, parting shot the OPI's director hits out at Sir Ken's supporters and the Baillieu government. Driving the future, how can Victoria's car industry stay viable, and are the strikes at Toyota really helping? And running out of steam, the government says no more cash for Puffing Billy. On Sky News and the Melbourne Channel, the Melbourne Report starts now.
From the Sky News Melbourne studios in South Bank, this is the Melbourne Report with Ahron Young.
Hello and welcome to the program. Also today we look into Victoria's double jeopardy laws and what it means for former Sergeant Paul Dale. But first, to this week's panel, Herald Sun columnist and RMIT lecturer Jill Singer, Essential Media and our social affairs commentator. Welcome back to the program, David Imber, and media lawyer Justin Quill. Thanks for joining us, guys. We start today with the Office of Police Integrity and the parting shot from its director, Michael Strong. In the annual report released to Parliament yesterday, he criticised supporters of Sir Ken Jones for spreading rumours. But this week we saw more allegations about the government's involvement and in particular the actions of Parliamentary Secretary Bill Tilley. Before we go to our panel, let's have a listen to what the opposition leader said this week, and he has been accused of pulling his punches with this statement.
My view is that I want to hear from the Premier. Why is it that he should stay in that role? I want an answer. I want the Premier to share with all Victorians why he thinks that this sort of behaviour is an appropriate standard to set. You know, I think that Bill Tilley's position is very, very challenging, and I'll be very interested to see how he explains himself, and I'll be very interested to see why it is that the Premier and presumably the Deputy Premier are happy to stick with him and retain confidence in him.
Daniel Andrews there. Well, Jill Singer, I'll start with you. Bill Tilley, is he causing a headache now for the government?
He should be, but it seems that the opposition isn't that concerned about it, so why should the government be that concerned? It all seems rather passionless and limp, doesn't it?
So
a bit like the OPI. It's a bit like the OPI. They're saying, oh, Sir Ken's mob were spreading rumours and gossip. It's all getting rather lame.
Do you think the media then are perhaps pushing this issue further than even the opposition is?
Possibly, and possibly they need to, though. Certainly, I see nothing wrong in this being investigated by the OPI. I think it's entirely appropriate. If Overland referred it, they're going to investigate it. It's perfectly reasonable. But I just don't understand this incredibly, so what response to it all?
David, do you think the public cares about how the government's handling this? We're seeing they're riding high in the opinion polls.
Look, this government's still pretty much under the radar, I think. I think they're still doing fairly minimal media, still believe that they can be a small target in government, which is an interesting approach because you can only do that for so long. And when they do that, we see reports such as this week where the Premier's Chief of Staff was accused of bullying a parliamentary officer. So I think if you run a small target strategy, then you're going to get easily distracted. But on the OPI, I think the media does cover this a little bit like sport, and they want the sporting contest. And I think for the public, there's probably a bit of confusion about who to trust and what's actually going on.
Do you think that's because there are a number of state political reporters who have to report on something? And frankly, I think over the past couple of weeks, the most interesting story that's come from the state government is Ned Kelly's head. Do you think that perhaps journalists are looking for something a bit meatier because really the government isn't putting out much policy at the moment?
Well, I think they are, and I think that's a really legitimate question. I think the public's probably interested too. I mean, it's fair enough that people are focused on federal issues, even though a lot of that's about intrigue and sport as well. But I think the state government is the government that delivers services to the community, and I can't remember the last time I heard this government talk about housing or talk about the environment or talked about a whole lot of issues that people are interested in hearing about.
Oh, they want to ban bongs. They're in there.
Yeah,
Justin,
finger on the pulse.
Totally.
Justin, I'll ask you, I just want to find out quickly, Michael Strong, the outgoing director, I guess, of the OPI, he's lashed out at the government. He's also accused many of those supporters, particularly those who leaked some of the emails, of spreading rumours. What do you think about Michael Strong's action?
I think it was a little bit petty. It came across as a little bit petty to me and a little bit limp. I've got to say about the OPI generally, and this report was really the icing on the cake for me, they just have produced constantly bad or poor results. If I delivered those sort of results for the
you'd be replaced by IBAC, perhaps.
I wouldn't have any clients. If you look at their success rate on matters that they took to the courts, it was appalling.
They did well with the armed robbery squad, though.
well, I mean, some people say the way they handled it wasn't fair. They might have got a good result, but there's a question about the fairness of it. So,
Hey, we're talking about results.
We're talking about results. Well, for anyone who wants to become a politician, they always say the most important thing to learn is how not to answer a question, particularly when you're the only minister put out on a bad news day. Here is Agriculture Minister Peter Walsh trying to stick to the script about dangerous dogs. Let's have a listen.
It's not up for me to comment outside my portfolio area, so we're here to talk about this issue about dangerous dogs, restricted breed dogs, and that's an issue for the Premier or the Deputy Premier and the Police Minister. Well, the issue is it's not up for me to comment. I've got a specific job for myself to do as part of the government, and that is around the Minister for Agriculture and Food Security and the Minister for Water. So my understanding is Tristan Weston is on leave, so apart from that I have no knowledge of what his actions are at the moment. Well, that's an issue you need to talk to the Premier or the Deputy Premier about, who is the relevant minister in this particular area. It's not for me to comment on what the Premier or the Deputy Premier may refuse to comment on. I'm here to talk about the issues in my portfolio area. I have an important role to play as part of the government in those areas, and in this case and this week, it's very much about this issue with amendments to the Domestic Animals Act.
And from a professional point of view, we think you did a pretty good job. Well, Victoria's car industry is facing more challenges, particularly at Toyota, where this week 3,000 employees downed tools over a pay dispute. Then this letter was sent out by the AMWU, or I should say was sent out by people, and the AMWU is trying very hard to say they didn't send it out. They say, you are the lowest of the low. We know who you are and what car you drive. We know where you live. Scabs do not go against the majority. Nice letter. Well, strike action aside, the car industry is facing a number of challenges. I spoke with David Purchase from the Victorian Automobile Chamber of Commerce. Started by asking about the health of the car industry in Victoria.
Look, I think automotive manufacturing in Victoria is doing as well as we could expect in these rather unsettling and very competitive times. The fact that we've got 3 manufacturers in this country for such a small market, I think is quite excellent. And we tend to overlook that fact.
At the moment, we're seeing unions threaten Toyota workers who refuse to go on strike. How do you think the bosses in Tokyo will be viewing this?
You know, it doesn't send a very good message. You know, if we send a message to the outside world that we're not very competitive, that we're not very reliable, then obviously that can have implications for us. They don't need to make their vehicles in this country or in this state, and therefore we do need to be careful in that regard.
You talk about Australia having 3 car companies, but how lucky are we to have those, given the federal government has to spend so much of our money trying to prop them up?
We do spend quite a bit of money ensuring that we have a manufacturing sector, and so we should. Now, if that's government picking winners, then so be it. I'll put my money on a winner any day of the week, and this industry is a winner.
And can we expect more job cuts from the car companies?
There may well need to be more job cuts in order to achieve the efficiencies that we need to have in order to stay at the forefront. I hope not, and hopefully, hopefully we won't see them. But if we need to affect more economies, as I said, to stay at the forefront, then so be it.
Over the past 5 years, we've seen a number of car components companies, a lot of small and medium-sized businesses connected to the industry hit the wall. How are they going now?
Look, they're doing it tough, as indeed some parts of the retail automotive sector are doing it tough. Those businesses in the parts component sector or in the retail automotive sector that go out of business, I suspect that some, if not a lot of them, go out of business because they're not as well run as they should be.
And so let's look forward to, say, 10 years from now. We used to have 4 car companies. Now we have 3. We're hearing from General Motors, we're hearing from Ford. They're talking about a one world vision. We may even see the end of the Falcon being manufactured here in Australia. How do you think the car industry will look in 10 years' time? Will it be different from how it is today?
That's a big call to answer that. And I think the answer to it will depend on how efficient and effective we are. If we've got a very competitive industry in this state and in this country, then we could well have 3 manufacturers in 10 years' time. I suspect that most people think we won't, but I believe that the answer to that question will depend on just what we do over this next decade and how competitive we remain. If we remain competitive, and we can in this country, there is no doubt about it, then we could still have 3 manufacturers in 10 years' time. But it will depend on whether we stay competitive.
Okay, David Purchase there. David Imber, I'll start with you on this one. Do you think the government should continue to support the car industry with funds, taxpayer funds?
Well, look, I think the community actually wants to have a country that makes things. We've done research at Essential that talks about people's views on manufacturing, and right across the country, people do believe that manufacturing industry is an important industry for Australians.
Why is it important?
Well, because it is not just a huge generator of jobs and good permanent jobs, generally well-paid jobs, but also there's a whole lot of research and development and technology that goes into the car industry particularly, and to higher-end manufacturing. It's not just about, low-end manufacturing. The car industry is actually about design and about, some quite significant bits of technology that go into making a car that make it place for highly skilled jobs.
Jill, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the government should be helping out with Australia's national pride about having a manufacturing sector?
Absolutely. I think the car industry is crucial to Australia and particularly Victoria. Most of the industry is in Victoria. But there are more than 30,000 jobs in the industry in Victoria. It's also important, I think, to consider that if we lose our manufacturing base, what happens when the cheap imported goods are not so cheap? We've lost our manufacturing base, China's booming, prices go up, we're stuffed.
And it's not just, I think it's important that when we talk about support for manufacturing, it's very easy for conservatives and economic rationalists to talk about protectionism and to talk about how bad this is. There's actually quite a lot of good things that come out of the car industry, cars that people want. We export from our car industry in Victoria. So I don't think the narrative that manufacturing is in the doldrums and that means we should all just give up and let this industry fail is actually appropriate.
Do we strike? Do we actually go back to work? It's a real issue, but I think I would say it's all about jobs in this case. It's not just the jobs within the industry. It's all the goods and services that are provided to the car industry. Lawyers, for example, have to
We've got to keep you employed, Justin.
That's absolutely right. And so there's it's not just car parts. There are that many jobs, not just tens of thousands. We're talking probably 100,000 jobs around Victoria, ultimately created from the car industry. So I think it's absolutely crucial.
And at a time when we're talking about what the government has or hasn't been doing on something like the OPI, where's a manufacturing plan out of this government? Where's any commitment from Ted Baillieu or his government to support manufacturing?
Okay. All right, well, we wanted to know what you thought and if perhaps you would buy an Australian car over an import. Here is Susan Wilson with your say.
The Australian car industry has long been the source of heated debate. Supporters say it's about Australian-made products and supporting Australian jobs, but critics question whether the country is big enough to support such an industry. So, what does the general public think? We hit the streets of Melbourne to find out if you'd pay more for an Australian-made car.
No.
Why not?
Quality's not there.
Probably not.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of car it was. Like if it was a gas guzzler, probably not. But yeah, now if it was an Australian car, yeah, I'd probably definitely pay more.
I really don't know. I suppose it depends on the quality of it.
No,
Why not?
I'd pay for the quality and the best car. Doesn't matter whether it's Australian or whatever it is.
Yes, I would.
Why?
Because one, I'm Australian, and two, I think the quality is better.
Certainly.
Why?
Support Australian.
Yes, I would. No, well, sort of, because Australia has some good cars, but I've also liked Japan ones, and because I've got an Asian car myself, a Toyota, so I love them better. But yeah, I wouldn't mind paying for Holdens or Fords more if they have the economic values and all that.
No.
Why not?
When I'm looking for a car, I just need something that's going to give me the best value. So.
Depends on the car, the model, the size. I don't know. Like if it, I probably wouldn't pay more.
Susan Wilson there. The Melbourne Report goes to air on Friday afternoons, and this program can be seen across the weekend on the Sky News Melbourne channel. We will be back after this. Welcome back to the Melbourne Report. I'm Ahron Young. A reminder of this week's panel: Herald Sun columnist and RMIT lecturer Jill Singer, social affairs commentator and Essential Media's David Imber, and media lawyer Justin Quill. Thanks for joining us, guys. Dozens of serious crimes could return to court for retrials when double jeopardy laws are removed in Victoria. Accused murderers, rapists and drug traffickers acquitted at their original trials are among those who could again be charged. For many, it's about resolving the Walsh Street murders, but this week there might be another case or two to come under review. Justin Quill, this isn't just about the Walsh Street murders, is it?
No, absolutely not. Although I do think that it's not the case that there are going to be dozens of cases coming back before the courts. It's going to be pretty rare. A pretty rare circumstance where the Director of Public Prosecution says, we didn't win the first case, but let's have another go at it. There was going to have to be something happen, some new evidence or something new that they can.
Well, what's changed? Why is this happening? It's happening around the world. Why? Why are things changing now?
Well, I think one of the reasons is technology. I mean, we have now the access to DNA technology that we didn't have hundreds of years ago or 100 years ago when these sorts of laws were commonplace. So I think now you're able to solve some crimes that occurred 20 or 30 years ago when the police started taking DNA samples but didn't have the technology to actually get the answers in relation to the crime. So I think that's one of the main reasons.
Jill Singer, you don't want police badgering people, though, after they've had a judge make a decision, though, do you?
I don't think that there's any evidence that actually happens in jurisdictions where they've removed the double jeopardy law. I think the reason that it is happening now is not just DNA, because they're saying we won't take a case back to court just based on DNA evidence. I think there's a general shift in attitude that for a long time we just took it as given that you could have a wrong guilty verdict, but you couldn't have a wrong not guilty verdict. And I think people are saying now, well, that's not good enough. And when you see people who get off and then tend to say indiscreet things or gloat about getting off, as we have seen
to prison
in
mates
part
or
of the Walsh Street case, we also saw it, remember when I was a kid, the Whiskey A Go-Go case in Brisbane, big firebombing of a disco, and the man who was jailed for that, the media went crazy, protesting his innocence. He was verbaled by the police, rah, rah, rah. Get him out of prison, he goes back to the UK and said, I did it.
Right.
These sorts of things, you really do want to grab them and put them back in the dock.
Yeah. David, I'll start with you then on this one as well. Do you think that we should have more laws, or do you think that this is one that should go to the keeper?
Look, double jeopardy is an important legal principle, and I think it is an important mark of respect, in a sense, to the legal system that we should have the best prosecution case or the best defence case up once. I don't think it's a good idea, and I agree with Justin. I don't think this is going to happen very often. But I do think we need to be careful to ensure that we do have all of the evidence up first time. But I think there may well be exceptional circumstances that warrant, a change to this principle. But it is important principle, and so I don't think it should be overturned lightly.
Justin, yesterday we heard some interesting allegations, some things read out in court, statements read out in court in regards to the murder of Carl Williams, things that he apparently wrote before he died. What do you think about that? And what do you think it means for Paul Dale? Do you think that perhaps double jeopardy laws could come into play there?
Well, the Paul Dale case is an interesting one because the charges were actually withdrawn, so there was never acquittal.
So they won't need double jeopardy.
So double jeopardy doesn't apply to him, but this it probably does illustrate, I think, one of the negatives of removing the double jeopardy law, and that is, in that case, if the police weren't sure whether they could get a conviction, they may well have decided, well, let's just push on anyway, because if we don't get a conviction, we can always bring him back around for another go. Whereas the double jeopardy law, in a sense, operated in that case because it made the DPP think, well, we better withdraw the charges, so we keep it alive. If something else comes out, we can then bring it back on and charge him at a later stage. So
no doubt police will be have a few things to say about this case as well now that those details have emerged as well in the court of law.
Well, it's the police have been very quiet. They originally wanted those statements suppressed, and they appeared yesterday to do that. So it's an interesting thing.
Jill, just quickly.
I was just thinking though that in the jurisdictions that have removed it, in the UK and other states of Australia, apart from Western Australia, there's been no evidence that prosecutions are weakening. So I think these concerns about what will happen and, well, you know, people put up sloppy prosecution cases because they can keep going back and have 50 bites at the cherry. I don't think the evidence is there that it actually happens.
Okay. Well, this is now a topic that I have been really looking forward to. Is there a kid in Melbourne who doesn't love puffing Billy, or an international tourist who doesn't head for the Dandenongs and board the slow trip to Gembrook? But this week, the operators of Puffing Billy warn the railway survival is at risk unless it receives an immediate cash injection to fix its ageing infrastructure. The Baillieu government is refusing to commit to it. Jill Singer, I'll start with you on this one. Since I cut you off before, $25 million is all they need. We seem to spend double that on a Grand Prix that happens for 4 days a year.
Well, that's right, and also Puffing Billy is such an integral part of the state and our memories and visitors to the state. I think everyone can remember going through that beautiful rainforest on the train, hanging your little legs out and waving at people, and a lovely experience. Some little boys, I'm sure, wanted to even drive the train.
What are you suggesting there, Jill?
I don't know. You might have had little...
Yes, when I was
hankering.
5, I wanted to be a train driver at Puffing Billy. I'm still hoping to get there eventually, but...
I think it's a good investment. That certainly government funds have not been pouring into Puffing Billy to keep it going. I had a look at the annual report for the last one, and I think they only had about 25,000 put in from the government, so it's about time that...
Sounds like it's been starved. I have a terrible admission, Ahron.
Yes,
I have not been on Puffing
You've never
Billy.
been on Puffing
Never
Billy?
been on Puffing Billy.
Right, okay.
Terrible admission.
Just you and I on this one.
But it is an important tourism icon, and I think 25 million does sound like a lot. It sounds like potentially governments have starved Puffing Billy for a while, and now we've got to make up for lost time. But I think it's really important when we talk about investing in tourism assets, something that does last 365 days a year as opposed to a few days a year.
Well, I just want to ask Justin quickly, because we need to move on. Do you think this perhaps says a lot about how we treat our volunteers and the tourism industry? Do you think that they're pretty much left alone? It's up to you to make this a survival, even if the state really needs it for our tourism?
Yeah, I think that's right. Happy to take the benefits as they provide, but perhaps not necessarily that keen or that willing to assist them along the way. I know David's very keen for Puffing Billy to be kept alive because he's desperate to do the fun run where you run against
it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know he's very keen for it.
I'll wave to you.
Well, now it is time for final thoughts. Okay, final thoughts. The panel doesn't have any idea what these topics are. They're not that scary, guys. I just want to start by asking about Mikey. Success or failure, Jill Singer?
Success. I use it. I like it.
Okay, David?
I've just started using it, and it's working for me.
Justin?
I use it. I think it's good. I think it'll get better.
Okay. Planning Minister Matthew Guy, he says he's got a surprise decision to rezone seaside farming for housing at Phillip Island. It's sparking fears of what will happen to Victoria's coastline. I'll start with you, Justin. What do you think?
One day we're told we all need to move into the inner city, and then the next day we're told we're going to rezone this and we're going to build more houses out there. We want people to move out there. I don't know which way we're going, out there or in here.
David?
Is there a development application that this government doesn't want to approve? It sounds like, from what I've been hearing around town, every developer in Melbourne has been in to see the Premier and Matthew Guy, and I think it's clearly open season for development, appropriate or inappropriate.
And Jill Singer?
And I think we've got serious problems still with planning in this state, and I think VCAT needs to be taken and strangled by the throat.
The final topic, this is sent in to me from someone in Washington actually who was reading this and asked me to mention it. The Australian government announced on Thursday that Australian passports will now offer 3 gender options: male, female and intermediate. The measure will enable intersex individuals, those who are biologically not entirely male or female, to categorise their gender as X on passports. Jill Singer, what do you think?
I don't know. I think this is amazing. Intermediate. What are you? I'm intermediate. It's a strange one, isn't it? I can't imagine anyone actually wanting to go by that definition.
This is quite a significant change, and Senator Louise Pratt from Western Australia, who's the first Member of Parliament who does have a gender partner, was really behind this move, and it's quite an important change to allow people who are transitioning but are not have not transitioned yet to have the opportunity to have their status on their passport. It is actually a significant move for human rights.
The Taste of Melbourne is underway at the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton. Here is Matt Bendel with Out and About.
Melbourne loves fine dining, and with over 100 exhibitors showcasing the best the city has to offer, Taste of Melbourne makes it worth celebrating.
Well, Melbourne really is the foodie city of Australia, so it really just encompasses everything great about the food and drink scene here at the Royal Exhibition Building. So everyone can come down, sample all the fine food that's available, not only in Melbourne, but from the surrounding regions and also throughout the country as well.
What aspect are you most excited about?
I'm really excited about our restaurant lineup. I think we've just got, such an amazing group of chefs coming down. Everyone works so hard to get ready. Each restaurant sells at least 5,000 dishes over the course of the weekend. So, we really appreciate the hard work that they put in, and everyone that comes here just loves being able to try so many different dishes.
It brings 12 really great restaurants together. There's 20-odd thousand people coming to sample our food and some of the best produce that Victoria has to offer as well. You don't often get to try 12 restaurants in one night, but you can here.
How much prep work goes into appearing at an event like this?
You have to get a menu and refine the menu and work out the logistics behind it. You're cooking something like 1/2 ton of chicken, so that's a lot of chicken. It's a logistical nightmare, but it's also totally exhilarating.
Matt Bendel there, and get along if you can. And that is the program for this week. Thanks to the panel for joining us. We'll see you again in a few weeks, because you'll be able to next week enjoy About the House. We'll be back in a fortnight, as I say, with another edition of the Melbourne Report. If you have missed part of this show, you can watch us online or all weekend on the Sky News Melbourne channel. I'm Ahron Young. Have a great weekend.